Buenos dias, mi amigos, and today I am in the beautiful western Argentinian city of Mendoza. Today we're talking what's going on in Argentina. We're going to go into the history, a little bit into the politics, definitely talk about the economy, and everything you need to know about this beautiful South American country in 2022. Let's do it. Vamos. Right now, I'm standing in Plaza Italia here in central Mendoza, and I think this is one of the best places to start a video about Argentina. Argentina is one of the most European countries, ethnically, that you'll find outside of Europe. There's a saying that the Mexicans came from the Aztecs, the Peruvians came from the Inca, and the Argentinians came from boats. And in many ways, that's very true, as Argentina has over 80% of their population deriving themselves from a European background, either Spanish or specifically Italian. You would think that the majority of people have a Spanish background because they're a Spanish-speaking country and that it was founded by Spain, of course, this more sort of modern state of Argentina. But actually, Italian heritage is the #1 heritage that you would find here, and this interconnection between Italy and Argentina goes way back to the mass immigration of Italians in the late 1800s, early 1900s. I have a whole video about it. You can check it out here. Mendoza itself is a celebration of Argentina in a lot of ways in the plazas that they've made. So they have 4 smaller plazas, meaning like small kind of park spaces just like this, and then 1 central Independence Plaza, which is kind of giving homage to the independence of the Republic. They have this one, Plaza Italia, talking about its Italian heritage. They have one Plaza España, talking about its Spanish heritage. One called Plaza Chile, which talks about the sort of formation of Argentina and Chile and the commemoration of the 2 brotherhood nations. And then Parque or Plaza San Martin, which is a park dedicated to one of the main founders of Argentina, one of the main revolutionaries who helped create an independent Argentina. So this is a very historic city with a lot of, you know, serious Argentinian historical context. So let's get into that now. Here we can see on this big monument here in the Plaza Italia, the 2 seals of Argentina over here on the left, Italy here on the right, Italy with the star, Repubblica Italiana. And what I find interesting, what I love, is the Argentinian symbol that they've got here. So they have the rising sun, which is a very common theme that you can find in Central America. And you can find this, which is what they're calling the Phrygian cap. The Phrygian cap actually has a very interesting story, and you can find this meaning a sort of symbol of revolution and a symbol of freedom. And you can find this on the coat of arms of many South American nations, the original coat of arms of the United States, and also of France, as this was the cap that was given to slaves through manumission, which was a Roman Empire term for when a slave was given their freedom after a stint of slavery. So it was given to them as a gift by whoever the slaveholder was, and it meant you are free. So that symbol has been adapted today, and now you can find it right in the heart of the Argentinian coat of arms, their sort of code of freedom, which I find very interesting. For those into Argentinian pop culture, one of the things that you'll find that people really identify with is this little girl cartoon character. Her name is Mafalda, and she was a cartoon that originated, I believe, in the 1960s or 1970s. And she became kind of this commentary on society. And so these comics, while of course being cute and kind of for children, she's sort of an important political figure. So she's even seen talking about democracy, justice, and liberty, important core values of the Argentinian sort of movements of freedom. And it's really important. She's like an important kind of mouthpiece of certain movements, and really important to the Argentinian culture as a whole. So this is Mafalda, and she's saying peace. So I've now made it to Parque San Martin, the biggest open-air park in Mendoza. And here on an Easter Sunday, they have people out selling different stuff. And it's a really good representation of modern Argentina, as it's very mixed. Lots of different things going on, which I'll tell you about. But before we understand this country that is pretty much notably known around the world for mate, the specific beverage that they drink down here, for football, Lionel Messi, that kind of stuff, and for really good beef, what is it more than that? Where did that come from? Let me tell you. So the history of Argentina goes something like this. This land, the southern South American continent, has been inhabited by pre-Columbian indigenous people for thousands of years. They lived here, doing their thing, trading, warring, the normal stuff that they did. But it all changed when the Spanish arrived in the Rio de la Plata area, in between where Buenos Aires is and Montevideo, Uruguay. If you saw that video, that's what I'm talking about. And the Spanish started making their colonial claim over this land, taking the land of Chile, the land of Argentina, parts of Uruguay, all the way down to the southern tip of the continent. The Spanish held this area and it became a very important trading area, as this was very fertile land, meaning the central part of Argentina, the Pampas, was a great place to grow and sell and trade, especially cattle, wheat, corn, and things back to the New World. They were able to trade with the locals and sell a lot of different products in the kind of Columbian exchange that happened here: potatoes, tomatoes, and other goods, especially gold from this part of the world. The identity of this area became notably Buenos Aires and notably Montevideo in Uruguay. And the indigenous people slowly started to become less of the identity of this land. From about the 1500s to the 1700s, the Spanish held a lot of this area. It was known as the Rio de la Plata, Plata del Mar area, Patagonia, and they were large swaths of land with not that many people. It wasn't until the mid-1700s that the local Argentinians sort of gained some nationalist sentiment, sort of found their identity, different from the Chileans, different from the Uruguayans, and they started pushing for this, let's say, nation state, after Spain was sort of taking a lot of their South American provinces and South American colonies, converting them into viceroys, which were a little bit more autonomous. And then after that, people, of course, in the sentiment of the United States, they were getting taxed, they weren't seeing a lot of representation, and they pushed for freedom from the Spanish. Argentina then got some independence, not too long after the Spanish Empire started to crumble. They became a big player in the region with large swaths of land, from the tip city called Ushuaia, which basically is the entry point to the Antarctic Southern Ocean, with the Pampas region and the northern sort of Andes region that they were able to acquire. The nationhood was built through this sort of gaucho culture, which we talked about in our gaucho video, these sort of cowboys, frontiersmen who were able to fight off the Spanish and create an independent Argentina. So in this sort of like cowboy way, so there's still that sort of vaquero, gaucho kind of mentality here, range people. And they created quite the large country, and it's one of the largest countries in the world today. As Argentina needed people, they were open for business. Lots of Europeans flocked to South America from the basically late 1800s to the mid 1950s. Lots of Italians, lots of other Spanish, lots of Germans after World War II, both positive and negative. Lots of Jews during World War II for positive reasons, obviously, avoiding the Holocaust. So Argentina became a very, very European place, and I have to say it's the most European place that I've been outside of Europe. At least it feels, you know, when you walk around the big cities here, you see the architecture, the influence, the food, the language, the culture. It's all very indistinguishable from sometimes mainland Spain. Of course, things are a little bit different here, but it feels very European. The north of Argentina is something different. I'll touch on that later. And then comes some main characters that you should know in Argentinian history. So the main person, that's probably the most divisive person in Argentinian history, is old Juan Perón and his wife Evita. And I'll tell you in a cheeky little voiceover now, because I want to be specific. Juan Perón is maybe Argentina's most notable political figure. In 1943, his party seized control of Argentina, and from 1946, he governed until his exiling in 1955. Perón is known for starting Peronism, a political ideology that was based on social justice, economic independence, and political sovereignty. It was seen as a third wave of political movement, being neither communist nor capitalist. Perón and his wife Eva became wildly loved political figures, fighting for the middle and working class and changing the country for a better future. To his opponents, he was seen as a fascist who emulated the rhetoric and policies of his contemporaries in Europe, such as Mussolini, Hitler, and Metaxas from Greece. Due to his government's harsh repressions on speech and opposition, when the time arose for power to be seized, Perón was banished from Argentina. His party regained power in 1973, in which he was allowed to return. Perón died in 1974, and the divisions between the Peronists and the right-wingers came to a head, embarking the country on a dark civil war called the Dirty War, La Guerra Sucia. After these divisions that happened during Juan Perón, the Dirty War started. And this was a period of just not good things happening in Argentina. Disappearances were rampant, war crimes against people, human rights violations, and of course the war with the Malvinas that I will tell you about in a second. They really left a national scar on Argentina, and it's something that a lot of people aren't sure how to process and that still comes up into the politics today. So walking around Argentina, there is one national issue that you see published by the government a lot. And it just happened so that the time I was here, they actually had the Veterans Day memorializing this. So we're just talking about the Dirty War. During the Dirty War, the nationalist government also started a war with Great Britain over the islands called the Falklands and the South Georgian Islands. So what you see here is a lot of, I would call it propaganda or pro-war situation stuff. You know, to each their own, depends on how you feel about the situation. I'm not one to judge. The main situation is that 40 years ago, Argentina invaded what they're considering sovereign land. They call them the Malvinas. The rest of the world calls them the Falkland Islands, more or less. And now the words are kind of interchangeable. This is a small island chain off the coast of Argentina that I guess historically kind of flip-flopped between the Spanish Empire, between Great Britain, and then also the newly founded Argentinian Republic. The nationalists in the sort of pro-Argentinian movement see the Malvinas as part of the national sovereignty of Argentina. They claim that it's stolen Argentinian land, and during this Dirty War, as a time to sort of bolster national sentiment, they invaded the Malvinas. Now, I'm not gonna lie, this war overall went pretty poorly for the Argentinians. They invaded, they were able to take the island for a small amount of time. They kind of besieged the island, they took it over, they floated all the way to the South Georgian Islands, which are very close to Antarctica. They took that as well. And then the British basically showed up, pushed them back, took the island back within like less than a month, and that was kind of it. But there's this sort of national identity that goes with this, where they have these veterans who served. A lot of people were scarred and felt really terrible about the whole situation. And they have this whole generation that were veterans in that war and saw terrible things, and really this whole national sentiment is still alive and well in Argentina today. So it's very interesting because I didn't personally know this before I came here, but there's a lot of propaganda, or at least whatever you feel about it, a lot of propaganda or a lot of recognition about this problem, and it's still well alive today, and there's a lot of territorial claim. Now, do I agree that Argentina has a claim to the Malvinas Islands? The historical record's a little bit fuzzy on that one, and honestly, not that many people live on that island. So, you know what, I'm not going to be one to comment on it. You can look it up on your own and make your own decision. You know, could go both ways. I can see it both ways on that. I think the only thing that really bothers me about this sort of nationalist claim to the Malvinas Islands or the Falkland Islands is that it's internationally recognized as British. Almost every country agrees that it's British. At least, you know, members with regarding to land and to policy. It comes off a bit nationalistic for me, and the islanders have been polled many times to say if they would rather remain as a Commonwealth kind of nation in the dominion of the UK or to be part of Argentina, and they continually in the high 80% continue to vote to be part of the Commonwealth, as most people speak English as their main language, and they don't have a lot of cultural connection at this point to Argentina at all. But what do I know? I'm just some travel vlogger, so, you know, don't take my word for it. Modern Argentina is a very political society. People seem to be very politically active. There's protests all the time. People are discussing rights, and it seems to be a very healthy democracy, but also a place with a lot of problems. And modern Argentina today, the problem that I think people are probably the most concerned about, minus indigenous rights and indigenous land rights, is the economy. And the economy is a serious issue, and it's something that's spiraling this nation kind of out of control at the moment. So let's get into it now. So the biggest problem in Argentina today in 2022 is definitely the economy. This economy has been experiencing hyperinflation over the past 5 years, but even more incredibly over the last 10 or 15 years. The value of the peso to the US dollar used to be 4 to 1 only about 15 years ago. And today the value of the peso to the US dollar is something like 200 to 1. So in a matter of 15 years, they've experienced thousands and thousands % of inflation. And so this brings us to their money, because the money is sort of, you can feel it when you're using the money. So this, for example, is 1 peso. So back in the day, this was worth something, this meant something. But today, even though it's in circulation, this is the equivalent of half a cent. And so for people living in an economy, half a cent doesn't do anything. So it's weird that stuff like this is still floating around here, and every year it becomes more and more irrelevant. So what this means is there's 2 exchange rates in Argentina. There's the protected normal exchange rate that the government decrees is normal. So it's about $1 to about 110 pesos or something. But then there's this shadow market price, which is actually the real exchange rate, which is more like $1 is about 200 pesos more or less. So it's almost double what the government exchange rate should be. They're calling this the blue rate parallel. And it's really important if you're a traveler here, because if you withdraw money from an ATM, you're gonna get the government exchange rate. That's the international financial institution rate within Argentina. It's a lie, don't do it. What you want is the blue parallel, which you can get by either exchanging cash in country with cambio people. You can find plenty of them in any major city. Just like dudes on the side of the road, they'll take you to a little sketchy room. They'll take your money and give you a much better exchange rate. Or you can do it through Western Union transfer, which you basically send it directly to you via Western Union. You go pick it up in cash in the country, and you get a much better exchange rate. So if you come to Argentina, this is really important, because you can have a very expensive trip, or you can have an incredibly cheap trip. Depends on you. The problem with this exchange rate system is that the currency is becoming worthless. And if your currency every, let's say, year is going up 50% and 50% and 50%, they're just gonna have to keep printing bigger bills. Now, to insulate from this, they have this fake exchange rate. But this doesn't make sense, and it's very impractical, because when you go and pick up your blue currency, or the real exchange rate, the real international exchange rate, the highest bill they give you is 1,000 pesos. The problem is this is about $5. So when you walk out of there, you're looking like El Chapo with like a stack of paper, you know, from your toes to your head. I mean, it's completely impractical. And I can imagine if you're a local Argentinian, you're getting paid in pesos, you know that whatever you have today, in the next year, you're just fucked. It's just not a good system, and it's very concerning for people living here. So I'm not really sure how they're functioning, but if you look at menus from even 2 or 3 years ago, you'll notice the prices being much lower, and you'll see the prices on every menu today having a little piece of paper on it with a new price. Very sad. So that being said, with a negative about the economy, I think Argentina is a land of natural wonders and a fantastic place to spend any amount of time. I think you probably have the biggest range of nature outside of, for example, mega countries like the United States. You have the epic Andes Mountains, you have the Pampas region, which is nice and fertile, you have the coastline, you have the northern area, which is very dusty and deserty. If you're an outdoors traveler, I don't think it gets any better than Argentina. They have this weird mix between sort of like semi-tropical, meaning like they have palm trees, and then they also have, you know, like kind of evergreen trees, beautiful mountain ranges. It's really, you know, some people say it's like God's country. It kind of feels like that. It's very, very nice. And the next time I'm back here, I definitely want to go to Patagonia. That's on my list. You can take an Antarctic cruise from the city of Ushuaia in the very, very south of Argentina and go to Antarctica from here. Even in the south of Chile and the south of Argentina, they even have penguins. So if you wanted to see penguins and also desert lizards in the same country, that's totally a possibility. It's crazy. I would say that Argentina has many of the positives of South America without a lot of the negatives of South America, meaning that it's very safe. You get this sort of vibrant culture, people being very friendly, really good food, really good music, people that like to go out and drink and party and have fun, but you get it in a very safe context where you can feel like you can walk around at night, you can feel comfortable, you can walk around during the day, no one's gonna really hassle you or bother you. It's really like, there's so many things, for example, that I love about Mexico, but there are also so many things that I really dislike about Mexico, because being there just doesn't feel great all the time, especially at night, especially even as a man. Whereas here in Argentina, unless you're in the city of Rosario, which is where Lionel Messi is from, and also Che Guevara, the notable communist, not a big fan of his, if you're in Rosario, they apparently have some sort of crime problem these days, but the rest of the country, very comfortable, very casual. Argentinians are really nice. I would say the English in this country is pretty questionable, but everyone's willing to talk to you. They're very interested. A lot of people ask you where you're from, where you're going, what your deal is. They will offer you to try things. They will give you some free stuff sometimes. It seems like the people here are very, very nice. And my final point about Argentina is that this is a country that you can just have a really good time in. It feels good to be here. I'm happy I came. I'm happy to explore more, and it's a country I would love to come back to. And I think that's the main point that I have about Argentina. It's that it's just gigantic. There's too much to see, and it's comfortable for families, for young people, and for old people. Not all countries are like that. Very, very special place. So with that, I will say thank you guys for watching. I hope you found this video interesting or helpful. If you have any comments, comment below. If you have any questions, go for it. I'd love it if you like and subscribe on the video. It really helps me out. And we will catch you from Chile. We're moving next. On to the next one. Hasta luego, mi amigos.